Good morning, everybody. Ben Jones here from Bronson Coffee Roasters, just hanging out in my workshop again. It's Monday morning, 21st day of June. I want to talk a little bit about cold brew and some options with cold brew. There are a lot of different systems out there. You can buy these really great, from Toddy, Filtron, bunch of different brands. You can do the really cool like Yama dripper towers, which are awesome looking. A lot of ways to make cold brew with some designated cold brew sets, but I'm more interested in, I don't want to call it a hack, but it's a way to make cold brew without investing up in one of those systems. So let's just start. I'm gonna get some coffee. We're gonna grind it up. So I've got a little scale here, and I'm just gonna weigh out, I'm just gonna give myself about 20 grams of coffee to work with, and we're gonna grind this. Now, the grinder, I'm setting it with cold brew. We want to go pretty coarse. So I have, excuse me, so I've shifted this up to be a little more coarse than I would for a French press. On most grinders, if you're looking kind of in that upper 3/4 or the coarsest third of the range that it will go, tends to be a good point to start. So, pardon the noise. Grinding sounds. Not too bad. I apologize. Usually I like to grind beforehand, but the morning got away from me a little bit. So, all right, brewing cold brew without the cold brew system, we've got a lot of options. So here in my workshop, I have a bunch of kind of Melita style drippers over here. These are the type, we've talked about them before. They have just the holes in the bottom, sit on top of your mug, the water drips through. Not ideal for cold brew, because with cold brew, we're looking at hours of brew time as opposed to minutes. And with those, we're just not going to get that drip through. If you are using a clever dripper, same sort of idea, using the Melita style filters, but it has that stopper so we can get the full immersion. So these actually work really well for small batch cold brew. Simply just wait a lot of time before you put it on your cup to drain. Another great option is a French press. Does the exact same thing. Anything you can get to just sit and let the coarse ground coffee steep in that room temperature or cold water, we're going to be good. So these are great for that. If you're using a mocha pot, which I have back here, doesn't even come close to being an option for cold brew. I suppose you could use, I'm sure there's a way to do something with a vacuum pot, but it sounds really messy and I'm not going to recommend it. And then another great option is going to be an Aeropress, because it does everything that we need a coffee maker to do. I'm going to start, we'll use our paper filters. Metal filter, again, will give you, probably not a bad idea if you're doing cold brew to use a metal filter. In fact, so the thing is, to be fully honest, I don't do much cold brew just because I don't like, and my body doesn't like to drink it. So if you're using an Aeropress, be careful to make sure that these aren't soaking for the entirety of the brew, because paper is going to soften and kind of weaken as it sits and steeps. But I'm going to go ahead and put a couple paper filters in there and have that ready. And normally, the way I do this, I would lock it on to the brew chamber and then go with this. But we're going to actually invert for this one. So inverted just means that we're going to put the plunger in before we brew, and I'm going to put it in nice and generous. Make sure that the entire width of the plunger portion is in. That puts you roughly at midway on the 4. You could even sneak it up a little bit more. if you want to. All right, so I'm just gonna put this on my scale. And because I tend to make a mess, I'll put my cone up here. And I've got about roughly 20 grams of coarse coffee. And this is real coarse. Doesn't translate super well, but I mean, you can probably see how chunky that is. We want to go with a nice coarse coffee. That really helps when we're separating the grinds from the water. So that's actually 23 grams. All right. That puts us to, if you're looking at it from here, puts us about midway to that 3. So one numbers batch there. And here's the fun part. All right. From here, we just take, this is just room temperature coffee brewing water, and I'm just going to add water. I'm not going to fill it up all the way yet. I want to have just enough so that I can now come in and make sure everything gets wet. Pull that down off the scale. I want to make sure that all the particles get really soaked. Give it a good little agitation. Excellent. All right. Put that back there, and then I'm just going to go and fill that all the way up, just shy of the very top. Excellent. So we now have, I've added about 160 grams of water. So that's what we're gonna do it. I'm just gonna take my lid now. I'm just gonna put that back on top, and that's just so it doesn't spill. If you're using a metal filter, I think that's a solid option. That'll give you a little more texture in your cold brew. It'll allow the fine particles to pass through, just like it does with hot brew. Then we have that. Now, from here, we just take this and we just set it someplace where it can rest and brew and steep. Some people like to brew 8 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours. The longer you brew it, the kind of more flavor it's going to pull out. You don't risk over extraction with cold brew the same way you do with hot brew. I think for most palates, you won't notice an over extraction. You might notice an under extraction just due to some weak flavors. And by weak, I do mean actually not enough pulled out of the coffee. So we're talking literally a lower total dissolved solid. Some people put this in the fridge. That's awesome. That helps keep it down below 40 degrees so that we don't have any bacteria growth. Some leave it on the counter. If your equipment is clean when you start, that will help to remove any potential bacteria from growing. So a lot of times, I mean, that's not whatever, cold brew, it's part of it. So anyway, with that sit and steep, one of the things I like about using an Aeropress for cold brew is that when we go to press it, we very easily get the majority of the water out of there. Basic recipe for cold brew, if you're calculating this up, if you take a pound of coffee, you're going to use half gallon of water. So I think that works out to be about 1 part coffee to about 7 parts water if you're going by weight. So it's kind of twice the amount of coffee that you use for each little bit of water. What that gives you in the end result is a higher strength or a concentrated density of coffee, which you can then put over ice and add a little bit of water and dilute it down to the preferred strength. And again, I like the Aeropress for this because you can squeeze out a lot of water. If we're using something like the French press, we get our grounds, our water, we leave this with the plunger up to steep for our 8, 12, 24 hours, whatever our time is. And then when we press it, that will isolate the grounds to the bottom, but you still have kind of that loose slurry. It doesn't compact as much as an Aeropress can. So when you pour, you still retain quite a bit of water down there. And if you're using a clever type dripper, be fully aware that it could take about an hour for this to drip all the way out. When you put that on top of your vessel to drip, it's going to release all the fine particles that are in the grounds. Over the steep time, they've settled down and they've embedded into the paper, which creates smaller drain holes for the brew to drip through, and that can take a long time. So the thing with cold brew is that you need patience. You have to make tomorrow's coffee today, or even make Wednesday's coffee on Monday. Definitely need to think ahead. The nice thing about this is you can do small batches, you can do medium batches, you can do large batches. And then you can put it into a container in the fridge and hang on to it if that's your thing. So I'm going to pretend now that, that this cold brew is done brewing, and I'm going to go and just kind of show you what it looks like when we... I'll take this, just going to give that a little rinse. I still have my morning coffee in this one. All right, rinse, swirl, swirl, swirl. So when we go to press this with the inverted method, some people just do a quick flip. I like to put my vessel on top and then flip it around. That just helps to prevent spills. There we go. And then it's just a simple matter of nice, even, gentle press. And with this still, same thing, just like with the hot Aeropress, nice, even, and gentle press is the way to go. Don't be in a rush. If you push too hard, even with the coarse ground, it can clog the filter. Then you just give a little pause, maybe even a little lift, and then resume. With this, and what we're getting down here, it's going to be incredibly under extracted because, you know, we're looking at just a few minutes steep time. But with the Aeropress, you can take this and you can press. Now I bottomed out. I'm pressing just now against the grounds. I can squeeze any liquid out of there. So I end up getting more of the liquid that I'm looking for. Whereas if you're using a French press, or again like the clever dripper, or you have other gravity dripper, you're going to get quite a bit of water that gets retained in the cold brew slurry just because it doesn't come out as well. So this is, hopefully you can see, this is very light. We did not dissolve very much of the solid material, so our total dissolved solids are quite low. This is a weak brew. Our extraction, the soluble yield, is very low because there is still a lot of soluble material left up here in our grounds that we didn't allow enough time to steep through. So one of the questions we get a lot is, how long does this need to steep? And I mentioned 8, 12, 24 hours. Play around with it. See what you like. See what's convenient for you. For some people, that 12-hour steep is really nice because you can set it up in the night before you go to bed. And then sometime in the morning, you can press it out. 24 hours is a nice round number because then you can, you know, do it at 8 a.m. prep, 8 a.m. drain. For some people, the 8 hours or 10-hour steep is really great because you can prep it before you go to work and then you can dump it when you get home. Lots of options. There are not very many wrong answers when it comes to cold brew. Use good clean water, batdwarfcoffee.com. Vesuvio is a really nice blend that we offer for cold brew. It retains some great orange tone, chocolatey, nice and rich. Similarly, look at one of the washed or natural coffees out of Ethiopia. Sometimes some Colombians are quite nice as well. So thank you for joining. I will see you back on Friday, and let's talk about some coffee. Take care.